All right. So everybody, thank you for attending our first CDF online meetup in I don't know, over a year. I'm super excited to be getting them going again. This is our September 22nd edition of our CDF online meetup. And we have Fatih Degirmenci, who is our amazing general manager for the CD Foundation. For many of you who may not know, the CD Foundation brought him on just before our travels into Austin. He started in June, and he took the helm, so to speak, and it started getting us all back together, getting the band back together, so to speak, and getting our heads back into what we need to do around the Continuous Delivery Foundation. So Fatih, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the job that you're doing and what's next for the CD Foundation?
Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. As Tracy mentioned, I started working at Linux Foundation, leading Continuous Delivery Foundation, 1st of June. And the first thing I've done was traveling to Austin to meet with our awesome community members. But before joining the CD Foundation, I worked for a telecom vendor, Ericsson, as an software engineer. And last 7-8 years, I've been 100% upstream open source developer, and I contribute to various open source communities, mainly around continuous integration, continuous delivery, DevOps, infrastructure, and automation. And I met with Continuous Delivery Foundation around 2019, and since then I've been contributing to this community. So it's kind of like, I feel like I haven't changed jobs, to be honest, because I've been part of the community and contributing to it across different initiatives and contributing to the oversight committee. So it's kind of just changing one hat with the other and continuing what I've been doing. So that is who I am, and maybe I should highlight the fact that I believe in this foundation a lot, because continuous integration, continuous delivery, these are common concerns for different types of organizations, regardless of their industry. And because of the importance and how critical this ecosystem is, Continuous Delivery Foundation will have a big role to play coming years, because our journey will never end with, especially within Continuous Delivery domain. So that's who I am and why I joined. I believe in this foundation. I believe in continuous delivery. I believe in community.
So since you have joined, we've had some discussions on kind of some new projects that the CD Foundation is working on. Why don't you kind of go through how folks can get involved in the CD Foundation, what the working groups are, some of the projects like Ortelius. I always like to talk about Ortelius. We have potentially some new projects coming down the pipeline. So what's up and how can people get involved? And let's talk a little bit about the working groups.
Yeah, sometimes it might feel overwhelming to join new communities, because the communities are large, communities are well established, they've been around for quite some time. And regardless of the background of you or which projects you are, interested in or contributing to, Continuous Delivery Foundation is providing different ways to join the community. If we talk about projects, if people want to contribute to projects directly, they can take part in those projects by joining their Slack channels, or joining their mail list, or subscribing to or watching repositories. And we have 8 projects within the foundation, and Ortelius is one of them, as you mentioned, Tracy. Apart from Ortelius, we have Jenkins, Jenkins X, Screwdriver, Shipwright, Spinnaker, and CD-RAN. So people, if they want to go
and Tecton.
Tecton. I was counting my fingers. Tecton. Yeah, sorry, apologies, Tecton committee, but yeah, you are part of the family. And people can obviously go and start taking part in conversation and contribute to those projects. In addition to that, and I am coming back to what I just mentioned, it may feel like it is too big an effort and it may become difficult to join those communities because they've been around for quite some time and they are pretty, familiar to each other. But what I can say is like, just go there, say hi on their Slack channels or pick an easy issue from their backlog if you directly want to contribute, or just ask what they can do, like regardless of the type of contribution, any contribution, just going and responding to someone, passing the link is a contribution. So it doesn't have to be like you go there and contribute a code your first day. You can start your journey within these communities in different ways, like as I was saying, just saying hi is a good start. In addition to that, if you are interested in different topics, more future-looking topics, like you are working for an organization and you have an issue with like scalability of a certain technology you are using, and you want to talk about those issues without actually discussing the project specifically. And to do that, as you mentioned, Tracy, we have special interest groups within CDF Foundation. And within those groups, we come together and discuss different types of challenges, use case requirements we might have within our communities or organizations to find ways to address those challenges. And one way to take part in those conversations is similar to taking part in conversations with projects. You can join Slack channel, you can say hi and introduce yourself, and someone will definitely come say hi back to you and answer any questions you might have. As I was saying, like you have an issue with scalability of a certain tool, you can just summarize the issue you are having and you can ask, okay, how can I start conversation around this topic? And then people will point you to one of the special interest groups, for example. And we have 5 interest groups, special interest groups within our community. And if we go to our web page, yeah, Tracy, you are showing our projects. These are our projects. And if you perhaps, maybe I can take over the sharing and browse through our website.
Sure, absolutely. I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so let me try that. I was going to do that, but I forgot that, like how
Perfect.
I forgot. Yeah. So if you look at, for example, the technology tab, you will see our projects there, and all of the cards here, they will give you information about where you can find their GitHub repository and so on. Like, let's look at Ortelius. The website is linked there, so you can go and read about Ortelius, what this project aims to solve. You can look at their GitHub repository. You can look at issues, find an issue, and start working with it. Or you can join their Slack channels, for example. When it comes to groups, special interest groups, they are listed directly on our main page by clicking Join the Community. On this page, you can see our special interest groups together with our projects. And our Slack link is available here as well as our community calendar. So if we need to summarize our special interest groups, the first special interest group is called Interoperability Special Interest Group, and it is one of the key initiatives we have been working with in CDF Foundation. And in addition to that, that group actually resulted in 2 new special interest groups as well as 1 project. So if you are an organization who uses multiple tools as part of CDF pipelines, and if you are having difficulties getting these tools working with each other, Interoperability Special Interest Group could be the place you could take a look at and join. And related to that, Event Special Interest Group is working with interoperability as well, but looking at interoperability challenges and attempting to solve those challenges by using events as viable means. And the other, yeah.
I have to say that of all, I mean, of all of the SIGs that we have, the event SIG is probably one of my favorites because it is really looking at solving this problem. And I hate to use the term disrupting, but it is looking at how do we disrupt the status quo. Everybody knows the struggles that we've had with plugins, and that is what the interoperability team SIG was initially working on. And the event SIG was born out of the interoperability to really work on defining what CD events would actually look like. So if that's an interest to anybody out there, I would highly encourage them to join that SIG.
Yeah.
It's a really important one.
Yeah, and I think this is also like this SIG, like there are other initiatives across other communities as well. This group is, I think, a clear example of how you can impact the entire ecosystem. Because this group was started, as you mentioned, Tracy, I think there were 3 or 4 people who came together within Special Interest Group Interworld and said, we want to work with events. And they went ahead with their work. They started with 3, 4 people in a work stream, and over time it became its own Special Interest Group at the same level as Interworld, because it has a lot of potential, not just impacting the ecosystem, but also making organizations, people's lives easier by bringing this interoperability as first-class citizen to different technologies we have within ecosystem. And from there, the journey with events is just starting actually, because that resulted in formation of CD Events project, which I can probably show. And this is like 2 years effort, result of 2 years effort, just getting the idea understood by different types of people coming from different industries, different organizations, and different communities. And it is really important to say that the people who are contributing to these efforts, they're really passionate about this topic, because it is sometimes working within communities is difficult and it is tiring, but having that passion actually and seeing things becoming real is very rewarding, because people realize how big an impact this project and the Special Interest Group events could make within the ecosystem. So
I believe it will be the
yeah.
future of CD pipelines is event-based systems.
Yeah, I think like if we look at what they have done until now, I think one of the proof of concepts the Special Interest Group created, that allowed 4 different technologies to interoperate with each other using their draft specification. It's not even released yet. Even without the release specification, the group and the project actually achieved and demonstrated that the interoperability is something that can be achieved within the continuity ecosystem. So that is a big contribution. Yes, we have a long way to go. Yes, we need to release the spec like 0.1 release, but regardless of when that happens, the group already made a big impact, and different communities outside of Continuous Foundation is also looking into this effort. So I can't agree more, like Tracy, what you are saying, events and CD events. I think we will be seeing more and more adoption to the spec and the project coming months. I'm not even saying years, months. I think 2023 will be pretty interesting from this aspect.
And I want to point out these SIGs. They begin and their primary work, even though the event SIG has now graduated into a proper project, the CD Events project. These SIGs are oftentimes almost like open discussion forums where these ideas are incubated and sorted out. And I think all 3, the interoperability, the event SIG, and the best practices SIG, is very much to that, an open forum for discussion. Part of that is vocabulary. And I know Fatih's going to say, Tracy's going to get on her vocabulary soapbox, but vocabulary is so important to all of these projects. Can you talk to us a little bit about what we're doing with vocabulary and potentially a new SIG around a reference architecture where vocabulary will be really critical?
Yeah. So let's go back about 2 years, 2.5 years. Like when we first formed the Special Interest Group Interworld, which I am showing its repository on GitHub, we started talking about the issues we are having with our company's pipeline. But we quickly realized that even though we are talking about our problems, we are using different words. Even between humans, we use different words to describe the same thing most of the time. And that comes from the terminology used by the tools. And that actually gave us a pause. I think this was like March 2020. We said, let's park everything and start focusing on vocabulary. I don't know what you mean when you say pipeline. I call that thing activity, or step is called task, or whatever. And that resulted in creation of some kind of a vocabulary document that actually brought in terms used by different tools together. And this gave us some kind of a Rosetta Stone. You know, like I am using project X and you are using project Y, and we are using different terms. And this document gave us a chance to see, oh, actually, we are talking about the same thing. And that actually let us start talking with each other in a much easier manner. Like it's English, you know, for CD, we need something like English where everyone can communicate through. And that is taken by CD events and SIG events. And SIG events started actually working on vocabulary even further to identify what are the terms they should be using for describing different activities within pipelines, so they can create different event types to express what is happening within the typical continuous delivery pipeline. And if you look at vocabulary draft, for example, like we have continuous integration events and we call things certain way, this gives us chance to come together a certain way of naming things. And that is important for us to start creating the specification, because then we can implement those things in our event specification and then use those events to make the different tools talk with each other, like making sure the machines can talk to each other. So
it's so important.
Thing. Yeah, foundation.
Vocabulary is so incredibly important. And I know in having these discussions, we sometimes don't understand what each other are saying because we haven't defined a common vocabulary. It's sort of like the term inflammable. Used to be, you'd see a truck carrying gasoline go down the road, it said inflammable, meaning that it could become inflamed. But people misunderstood what that meant, meaning that thinking that maybe it wasn't flammable, right?
Yeah.
So they just they took that term inflammable now as a new word. A new word is flammable. So people understand, no, it's flammable. Inflammable means it can become inflamed. And sometimes these terms they can be critical that way when we're discussing these concepts. In particular, we ran into this during events, and as you pointed out, we ran into it during interoperability. So if you're a Word person and if you like these kinds of discussions, these SIGs would be a really good place for you to contribute. If you feel like you could help with really defining the vocabulary, because there's not all of us are Word people and not all of us are communicators, and we need more of those folks to help us to build this vocabulary. And the vocabulary too could potentially define how we manage the landscape, because the landscape tells us it is part of the vocabulary. So these things are all super interconnected, and much of it has nothing to do with coding. If you're a coder, one of the projects is a great place for you. But if you're not a coder and you want to get involved and you're a communicator and you really understand the DevOps process and understand how important vocabulary is, that this is an area, the interoperability SIG, the event SIG, or the best practice would be a good spot for you.
Yeah. So you mentioned landscape, like even on the landscape, like we don't have that vocabulary type of thing here, but there are some keywords there that are like basics for contents. They're like build, test, like security scanning and so on. And I think the CD events and broader interoperability efforts we have within the Content Foundation lay the groundwork for the future, which will hopefully help more projects than just what we have within CD Foundation to adopt these terms. Because in the end, what users experience when they use these different projects is something we really need to care about, because if the users are struggling by making these tools serve their needs within their organizations, or if they are putting a lot of effort bringing new tools into their pipelines or replacing existing tools, then we may not be doing our best to help them. We need to make their
Right.
lives as easy as possible, because in the end, once organizations start embracing continuous delivery, they also start looking different technologies, and they need to make technology selections. And if the projects are actually taking part in these conversations with interoperability best practices and events groups and adopting what is coming out of these groups, then it will give them leading edge when different organizations start making technology selections. That is the natural thing. Like if I look at multiple tools and if I see they are playing well with each other, then I would probably look at those technologies more closely than the others. So the other thing you mentioned, Trace, reference architecture, and that is another thing I want to highlight, because now if we look at our Join the Community webpage, and we see all these 5 special interest groups there, and they're all doing great job, like MLOps, software supply chain, they're all trying to contribute from different perspectives to make continuous delivery more accessible to different types of organizations. But what we realized is, like, yes, we are all doing our best to contribute to domain, but sometimes it might become a difficult thing for new people to understand how these different initiatives could help them to, achieve continuous delivery. That gave us a starting point when it comes to what we call reference architecture, because the starting point for reference architecture is to have something like overarching effort above different groups we have within Continuous Delivery Foundation, consuming what is developed by these different groups and putting them together in an easily consumable manner. So if I am coming from a large organization and if I want to take a look at something and take that as a blueprint to bring continuous delivery to my organization, reference architecture could serve that role, giving a top-down look at the typical continuous delivery pipeline, seeing, okay, we have a vocabulary there. So I can take a look at that vocabulary, because vocabulary is foundational for reference architecture as well. And that could make lives of those people who are trying to transform their organizations to start their journey in an easier way. Rather than looking at 5 different things, they can look at one thing that gives all this information in an easily accessible manner. And that is the web page I am showing at the moment.
And we are at a point of inflection, I guess you would say. There's obvious tension on our pipeline. It's being stretched in the way we currently run RCD workflows. So this is the time for companies to start reevaluating where they're at in their DevOps pipeline, understanding what's missing. And that's why this reference architecture that's coming out of this best practices group will be super helpful, because there is a maturity level that we need to achieve, especially as we move from monolithic style applications to lots of microservices being pushed all day long across the pipeline, with security involved in that. So this is a really good time to have this discussion. And again, if it's an area that you have expertise in, we can use you on this project.
Yeah. And the thing, like the other thing, like now we have organizations at their different, stages of their transformation or continuous delivery journey or whatever. And regardless of where those organizations are, they could be just starting or they could be very mature when it comes to continuous delivery. I think this type of effort, reference architecture, could be valuable from many different perspectives. Like, you might think you are ahead of everyone, but you can look at what is happening within the communities and benchmark yourself against what is discussed within communities. It could confirm your thinking when it comes to you are being ahead of others, which is actually a good thing, because then you can come and hype others within the community by contributing this effort. Or you might realize, oh, we have this cool pipeline there, but we tightly integrate all these things together. But within reference architecture, the events are highlighted as something to address interoperable things that could give you a different look at the same problem and could change your life, because then that would bring scalability to your environment when it comes to continuous delivery, and that would give you a chance to bring in other types of technologies and have complete visibility to what you are doing. Because again, if you go back to events, one of the discussions that's taking place there is introducing observability into CD events. And you might not have observability within your pipelines today, but by contributing to CD events and reference architecture, you might actually bring those things back to your organization as, learnings and things to adopt. So again, there are different ways to contribute. You can just read the documentation. You can just, send a pull request, update documentation. Or again, if you look at the view and view points, for example, you might be working as like product manager, and you might come and contribute your perspective into this document, sharing your, thoughts around certain things when it comes to how a reference architecture could be and should be.
And you mentioned, there's two sides, a company who's never used a pipeline before or has used it in a very minimal way, and then the mature ones. And I almost feel like they're both in the same place. Because if they're super mature, meaning they've been around for a long time, they're probably old and not as agile as they need to be, not in terms of agile development, but in terms of the pipeline itself being agile. As you pointed out, we want to add observability, or we want to add the scanning of an SBOM. That can be a major project for a company who has hundreds and hundreds of workflows that they have to update every single one. So if you're going to update it, you better, maybe it's a good time to look at your entire pipeline and see what needs to be fixed before going in there and doing each one at a time. And this again is why that reference architecture project is timely, to say the least.
Now you mentioned SBOM there, that reminded me, supply chain security. I think because everyone is talking about it, we have to talk about it as well. What we are doing within the community when it comes to software supply chain is now if you look at what's happening to different organizations lately, many bad actors are hijacking pipelines. Like you might have your container image, built in air-gapped environment and signed and so on. You might have SBOMs and so on. But if you are not taking enough care to secure your pipelines, someone could come and inject malicious code through your pipelines. And pipelines, especially in continuous delivery context, they give you direct access to production. That is the whole point, like bringing new features, bug fixes to end users as quickly as possible in a sustainable manner, security and speed. The security is key there. If it is not taken care of, bad actors could actually use the pipelines to, cause big issues for end users. And to address that, we actually started a new special interest group within Continuous Delivery Foundation, which is displayed on our webpage, which we call it Software Supply Chain SIG. And in this SIG, we are contributing to overall efforts to improve the state of software supply chain from continuous delivery perspective, because sometimes some people may not focus on how critical continuous delivery is when it comes to software supply chain. Because again, if we don't secure our pipelines, that could result in a lot of big issues for our users. And to be honest, Continuous Delivery Foundation is not just looking at this security topic just beginning of this year. I think Special Interest Group Security was one of the first SIGs that was established in CDF, like 2019 perhaps. And all those conversations were taking place within that SIG. So what we actually did was like we just renamed that SIG and continued that work. So it's like we are not just realizing the importance of security now, but we are actually now focusing on continuous delivery aspects a bit more than how it was in the past, because now we have other communities looking at software supply chain security, such as OpenSSF. So we don't want to reinvent things, but actually we want to take part in those conversations and contribute.
And I'm wondering if in the end, having CD events, will it be easier to protect the pipeline itself with events? Do you think?
I think now,
or audit it, and because somebody would have to audit the the process and the payload. And if somebody's touching that, I'm wondering if it would be it's harder to hack a pipeline if it's based on events as opposed to a script.
I think the events bring in loose coupling, and loose coupling means you can make sure that certain tools within your pipeline focus on certain things, and when that is done, they can tell what that tool did at that stage of the pipeline at any given moment. And that actually opens up a lot of opportunities, because then you can hook in different parts within your pipeline and see what that part or stage within the pipeline is actually doing. And if you notice some anomalies, because all these things are published on message bus, for example, you can add some auditing capabilities there. And if you notice something that happened that you don't expect, then you can quickly react, because those events are published in real time. You don't actually have to wait hours for realizing that something is going on, which you are not sure what. So you can actually easily pinpoint where that thing is happening with the help of events. So events itself is not going to solve the issues, but it will make those issues more obvious and easily accessible. Because you are simply hooking into, like, if you think this as a river, you are putting different, like you are fishing, for example, you are putting things, nets, different places, and you are catching fishes there. It's events like that. You continuously look at events and you collect them, and you can either look at historical data or you can look at real-time data, which gives you a lot of opportunities to put policies down. Like, policy is one of the topics I am very into, and you can enforce policies based on what's happening within your pipelines based on events. So
now I'm going to step back. And when we first started talking, Fatih, you and I, we were both talking about policies and OPA and how we can build policies into this. I think that policies are based on two activities, data and actions around that data. Of course, it's why Ortelius's project that we contributed, because we believe in all of that data being in a central location where you can then apply policies to it. Have we gotten back to, or will we start talking about in the CD Foundation, the policies, and maybe the CD events as a way that we can start building those policies?
I think that work actually still continues in a somehow different manner. Now, I'm going back to our vocabulary discussion again. One of our community members actually put a lot of effort in coming up with documenting different pipeline stages and steps. And if you look at pipeline terminology here, in this pipeline stages and steps, there are certain things that could actually help people to see where policies can be enforced. For example, like if you are committing a code and if you are using an outdated dependency, you might want to block that code getting merged right at that moment, rather than identifying that outdated dependency right up very late in the pipeline after it gets into container image. And using events or to carry this information, like what commit happened at what, in which repo, and what changes or what is delta between previous commit and the upcoming commit, then that can help you to bring in policies there. So I think I wouldn't say CD events will be, taking direct part enforcing in policies, but it will be an enabler to putting those policies in play by giving a common vocabulary. So you can, let's say, Open Policy Agent, it adopted CD events, for example, it can consume CD events from any pipeline there, and then Open Policy Agent, instead of directly integrating that with certain tools and technologies, it can actually use events to, enforce the policies written by the organizations. So that is how I see this. Like, CD events is like sitting abstracting the details of different tools within the pipelines, giving easier way to express what's happening with the pipelines for other technologies to come and, enforce policy, for example, or observe what's happening.
Again, it creates a more agile pipeline,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm such a fan of that potential technology. Well, before we're headed up to the closing in on our hour, and we do have some questions. Here's one interesting question: is there a way to host the CDF landscape in our organization? And I really think what that question is how that goes back to what should our reference architecture look like? Can you speak to that? And if you want to ask that question directly, the person who asked it, you are welcome to speak. Yeah, but so each one of these categories has potential tools that you can use within that. The CD Foundation doesn't right now have a sort of a prepackaged pipeline that you can host within your organization. But that reference architecture is what we're working towards, right?
Yeah, reference architecture, actually, now we need to, because when we talk about reference architecture, sometimes some people might mix that with reference implementation. So reference architecture gives a blueprint for anyone to implement that. It could be open source communities, it could be organizations like Moise, you are asking questions, like if you want to have your organization's pipeline to progress towards future, you can take reference architecture as a baseline or as a blueprint and then start implementing that architecture within your organization, or start contributing to organizations or communities who are actually implementing that architecture. So it's like kind of collaborative, collectively developed, future-looking pipeline, if we put that way, because it will bring in different types of developments within our community together. So, yeah, you can bring reference architecture to your organization, but if your question is actually bringing continuous delivery landscape, as I am displaying on my screen within your organization, I believe this framework is an open source framework, and we can talk about this, like how you can bring this landscape within your organization and host it internally on our Slack channel, because I need to look into details. But
well, it's all out there on Git. That's because I know I worked on it initially. So it is out, but there is some complexities behind it. I have to say.
Yeah, it's like, because it is working in open setting, public setting, and you may need to patch things around to make it work in like limited connectivity and so on. So that might be something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, so the next question is about Hacktoberfest. And I think this is a fitting way to end this, our first CDF online meetup. Just so everybody knows, the next online meetup will just be around the corner. On October 5th, we will be, two of the Ortelius contributors will be talking about how to get a local development environment set up and some of the tools that you might use if you want to become a contributor. There is some work to do if you want to become a contributor on any of these projects, and having the tool sets kind of already understood and downloaded gets you started. So that will be on October 5th, and it's advertised, and you can sign up in the same way as you did here on the CDF online meetup. But what other things are projects doing for Hacktoberfest for the CD Foundation? I know the CD Foundation itself was participating.
Yeah, Ortelius is one of them, as you mentioned, and Jenkins is running Hacktoberfest, and Jenkins X is working on it as well. So we are working with our projects who have plans to run Hacktoberfest, and we will publish a blog post during next week where people can go and take a look at it, like how they can take part in Hacktoberfest, which projects are participating, and so on. So yeah, we are, I'm not sure if I should say we are doing, but we are coordinating these different efforts. Like Ortelius, yes, you are running your own Hacktoberfest yourself, but CDF Foundation helps with, increasing the visibility of those Hacktoberfests done by our projects. So check the CDF Foundation website by next week, and you should see a blog post there.
And you do have to sign up. September 26th is the first day to sign up, and you have to go to the Hacktoberfest website to sign up. Yeah. Once you do sign up, let's say if you wanted to contribute something to vocabulary, updating a document, if a pull you just need to tag your pull request Hacktoberfest, and then whoever approves the pull request, you'll get credit for that particular pull request. I believe that's how it works. Now in the Ortelius GitHub repository, we've already marked many of them Hacktoberfest, and we've also marked them good first time issue. So that's to help you get started on in the process. But just be sure if you are doing any work during that month and you've signed up for the Hacktoberfest celebration, just make sure you tag it Hacktoberfest. And I'm glad to hear Jenkins X and Jenkins has already gotten their stuff set up. It takes a while for the open source side to set up their environments for Hacktoberfest, but it's a lot of fun once it's done.
Yeah, I think next week we will have more information about what we are doing in CDF Foundation site. And thanks, Tracy, for this Ortelius, because that's actually helped us with our guidelines as well, like what you described in the mail.
Well, Jenkins taught us. Jenkins has done it a few years, and we just copied exactly how Jenkins did it.
But
we tend to follow their lead because they know what they're doing.
Yeah, open source, like there are lots of great, sources out there, great communities, great people. So it really, just start going back to your very first question. I think how you can join the communities, regardless of which community, like it could be considered foundation or other communities, just saying hi makes you part of that community. Like just say hi and someone will
just show up.
Say hi. Yeah, exactly.
It's just about showing up. Showing up is literally 50% of the battle. And sometimes it's hard. Women in particular, we have found that we struggle hanging on to women in the open source community. They have family obligations, not only raising children, but they tend to take care of their parents. So it can be, showing up is half the battle, but, just show up and we'll make sure we help you get to work on a project that would be fun and interesting. For example, the Ortelius project got a grant for building out an immutable blockchain of SBOM data, an SBOM ledger, so to speak. And if you want to learn blockchain, it's a really good place to do that. So open source, people don't realize when you are contributing to open source, it doesn't mean that you're an expert programmer. And in many cases, open source is a way for you to learn how to code. It is a really good platform for, it's almost like it's a platform for kicking off your career in areas that you have not worked in before. Or you get recognition because you have worked in it and you have something to bring to the table in some of these open forums, these discussion groups. So either side of the coin, we're happy to have you. So, don't think you have to be a pro. If there's an area that you want to get started in and you want to learn more about DevOps, there's no better place to be working than, contributing than the CD Foundation in whatever category that you fit.
Yeah, and last thing, I think open source made me a better person, regardless of the technology community. I think I learned a lot from lots of great people like you, Tracy. So it's great to be within CD Foundation. So.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I love the CD Foundation. As you know, I've always supported it. And DevOps has always been something I've been fascinated by. And now, morphing everybody from DevOps to DevSecOps is now my next kind of battle. And all of these things we're doing at the CD Foundation, the events, the interoperability, the reference architecture, and the supply chain, it all has to do with morphing us into a better, all of us into being able to manage code across the pipeline in a much more efficient and faster way. Well, thank you, Fatih. I so much appreciate you being on our first to kick off this kind of new season of CDF online meetups. Again, October 5th will be our next one. Join two of the Ortelius committers. Sasha Wharton is working with a university student by the name of Arvind, and they were able to get Arvind really set up to become a contributor. And they're going to go through that process of how they how to get yourself set up and what tools you should be looking at using for becoming a rock star as a contributor. So I hope you can all join us for our next episode of CDF Online Meetups. Thank you. Thank you all.